Good morning. I'm Mark Hansford, editor of New Civil Engineer magazine, and welcome to our webinar where today we are seeking to break down the barriers to BIM adoption. Now, according to a recent survey by Allplan and the ICE, 9 out of 10 engineers now consider BIM relevant to their work, but less than 50% claim to have an adequate grasp of how best to use it to their advantage. Lack of funding, issues with exchanging data, and a general lack of expertise in the industry are all identified as key barriers. Now, to understand why these challenges still exist and how to overcome them, I'm delighted I've got with me here today 3 absolute experts in this subject, and we will be talking through their experiences and the survey itself. Shortly, I'm going to hand over to Pell Frischman, Director of Transport at Saj Majalesi. Sorry, Saj. Welcome, Saj.
Thank you.
And then we'll hear from Solid Structures founder, Sean Daly. Welcome, Sean.
Good to be here.
But first, I'm going to introduce Allplan International Technical Manager Ralph Pullinger, who did the survey with the ICE, and I'm going to ask Ralph to talk us through some of the key findings. Ralph, good morning.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yes, the observations from the survey are quite interesting. They throw up some interesting responses and also some surprising and unfortunately non-surprising responses as well. So as you can see here from this particular slide, the response that we got from various sizes of organisations are very similar in some respects, but we're still seeing that BIM is considered irrelevant by some of the smaller organisations, which is still a big shame, and it's a big stumbling block for the industry. The survey itself, we're glad to say, covered many sizes of organisations, many disciplines, and many job descriptions within the same company as well. So, you know, we like to think that it's a fairly well-rounded survey, for sure.
And I guess just, you know, on that, just what the size of the company and that kind of you know, the smaller companies really grappling with it. I guess I know we've probably got quite a lot of people from smaller companies watching today. So this is a great opportunity, please, to send in your questions because we would like to answer them as we go and in the Q&A session later. So yeah, anyway, do continue.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So I'm not going to go through the whole survey because that would probably take up a good part of the hour, and obviously our 2 guests have got some really good studies to share with the audience. But interestingly, the results of the survey, particularly with regards to what were the main headaches, the sources of errors that were introduced in projects. In some respects, it's pleasing to see that design changes were top of that response list. But do you know what? Design changes have always been the top of any survey response, going back to when I was on the drawing board. So that was the biggest headache. Someone changes something, you've got to change all your documentation as well. So that's not surprising. For me, the thing that isn't high enough is the incompatibility of different software systems. How to exchange data in this digital age. And for us at Allplan, that's one of the single biggest things that we want to see overcome in this industry. If this industry is going to advance, that is what we're going to have to overcome first and foremost. And it's that information exchange which is critical to a success or failure of any project, really. I mean, it used to be that you sent faxes, and that's showing my age a little bit, unfortunately, but you know, so what? Or worse still. But if you didn't get the right information at the right time, you're always going to lose. But now it's what type of information are you going to get, rather than when are you going to get it? How am I going to incorporate it? What do I need to do to make it work, rather than pushing it through lots of translation processes? So exchanging information.
And that is emerging still as a big issue. People
struggling
to sort of exchange information.
The thing is, open BIM is one of these great topics, and lots of people talk the talk, but don't walk the walk, which is a bit of a cliche, but unfortunately it's still true. And certainly from my personal perspective, is that being able to take information and move it around the project team without recreating that information, again, that's got to be the ultimate goal that we've got to aim for.
I personally think there's a tie-up there, Alf, between design changes and incomplete information that I've seen. The thing is, you get sent a model, say an architect's model, and it might be missing something, but you might not be aware that information is missing until later in the process, and it emerges that through design development or whatever the architect, that something should have been there, and then a design change results because of that lack of information, because you didn't know it was supposed to be there. And I think it's, the BIM and the 3D doesn't take away from the fact that you've still got to have a conversation. This is still you've got to do your duty in making sure that the other person knows what they are, what you're sending and what they're receiving.
Yeah. It's like people will email rather than pick up the phone, or they won't. Or they'll shy away from a meeting because it's not digital. But I mean, engineers, one of the part of being an engineer is being able to communicate. If you can't communicate effectively, essentially you're not an engineer. And that's what sometimes I think that's what engineers are getting away from, is that those communication skills and how to communicate, maybe.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of that you might assume that the digital age and the use of all this technology that talks to itself and automates a lot of the processes, it's almost replacing that need to communicate. But actually, if what you're saying is actually, even as a software company which has got all kinds of mechanisms to allow people to communicate without talking, that ability to talk is still really important. That's quite interesting.
It is, and it's all we. I still like to think that all we do are provide the tools, and the right tools, connected the right way, to enable people to communicate designs and what to do on those projects and how to do it more than anything. So, I mean, I always used to talk about coordination exercises being done with drawings over a great big table in a site office, but maybe it's with a TV screen or a magic whiteboard and so on and so forth, and clash detection software or whatever. But it's still a tool. It's what you do with it that really counts, and that's what I think people are some are being misled on, and others have maybe just lost their way a little bit.
I would perhaps say there's also perhaps a misconception, actually. I quite like the analogy you use as a language. So in other words, this business of incompatible data, I don't think it's necessarily incompatible. It's just like having different languages. And the trick is translation, or having a translator, if you like, which again comes down to communication. So I think if people understand that this is actually like languages and you just need that sort of translation, then I think actually the perception of how as a challenge becomes better. Because of course, if you look at things positively, you can achieve better. But if you think, oh, that's a big challenge, so you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. If it's too big, I'll ignore it.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, so back to the survey.
Back to the survey. I particularly drew upon this particular slide because of the responses based around what BIM levels organisation or people within organisations thought that they were operating on. And I think this is wonderful, because every time I've asked what BIM level do you think you're at, the responses are varied immensely, and that's certainly borne out in the survey. So, we see a majority operating on level 2, then level 1, and some are on level 0, and some perceive, a very small percentage perceive themselves, as being on BIM level 3.
I always love it when people say on BIM level 3, no one actually knows what it is.
Yeah,
and they're already there.
Yeah. Well, we're on
confidence.
BIM level 3. It's like keeping up with the Joneses and stuff like that. So, you know, people that say they're on BIM level 3, I would like them to sort of like maybe write in and tell us exactly how they think they're on BIM level 3, and to describe to me what BIM level 3 looks like, because I would certainly love to see that. And it's this, I mean, you can think of it as pigeonholing to some degree as well, I guess. But interestingly, I think what on this one is how the perception changes depending on what BIM level you're on with regards to where the problems occur. And as you can see here on the table on the right, is that for BIM level 0, which I still love, design changes are still top of the table.
Yeah.
But as we come down as we go up the BIM levels, what we see is a swing sort of towards the incomplete data or the electronic or the digital side of the exchange, which I think is quite interesting. And I think it's also borne out with, it's sort of, I guess, people in the know on these projects understand what it's all about to get success out of the projects.
Yeah, you can absolutely see that on a few of those questions, can't you? It is as you get into that level 2, quite advanced stage, it's about sharing data.
Starts to
it's
swing,
all about data,
which
isn't it?
again is an indication about people's knowledge, and also their understanding about what it makes to you know, for a project to tick.
That's interesting.
So obviously the survey, we talk about many different things, and you know, when that survey is published, which will be soon, you know, the audience will be able to see exactly or draw their own conclusions from it. But collision detection is still placed highly on that list of uses of BIM as a perceived benefit. But you know, again, that's been one of those things that has been pushed on consumers, I think, more than consumers realising what BIM is for. Because again, I go back to what I said, it's a tool. Fundamental deliverable for an engineer are drawings, calculations and schedules. I don't think that's not going to change in a long time. No. So any tool that allows you to create drawings better, more accurately, with more efficiency, similarly for calculations and schedules, then that's a good tool. That's a tool that I would have in any toolkit. We also asked the question about workflows with regards to how they are currently on 2D. And as the slide shows here, would those workflows transfer into 3D modelling and into BIM? And there are, again, varying results, as you can imagine. And I think, again, what it says here to me is that, again, those in the know think that they won't transfer. But if software can enable you to have similar workflows in 2D that transfer into 3D and into BIM, then again that will addresses some of the other concerns that appear later with regards to education and training. So, and this is that slide. As if by magic. So these are, again, some of the comments from survey responses, direct quotes from people that have been surveyed. And it's about, fundamentally, what sticks out here is the fact that training, investment and understanding are all still part of the problem. And it was always a problem 10 years ago. So unfortunately, this is not surprising to us, because organisations, and with all due respect to our panellists here as well, who have seen the light and who have invested in training and got on board. If you don't train, you won't see the benefits. If you don't invest, if you don't keep up, you don't see the benefits.
Well, I think we'll come back to that later, because I guess that finding the space to invest is difficult. All companies, and certainly I'm sure, Sean, you've got views on that as a smaller company and that need to invest.
And this sort of last but one slide that I've got here that I've picked out, again, it's one of those things that within the design team, downstream issues are still prevalent.
Yep.
So communicating with subconsultants, subcontractors is still a big issue. But with the design team and the upper reaches upstream, then it's less so. And again, BIM was one of those magic one-stop fits all sort of thing that was supposed to be in the whole of the project team, but it's still not finding its way properly down into those subcontractors. So there's still benefits to be made if BIM can get further on down and embedded into the whole design team rather than just the upper reaches of the design team. And the last slide here, what I take from this is that from an industry perspective, I think we need to be doing a lot more. We need to be pushing it out. We need to be talking about modelling, but we also need to be talking about 2D documentation as well. Just because we've got these great tools in this digital age, it goes back to what I said. Documentation is still key to a successful project, and being able to document more efficiently, more accurately, that's the biggest takeaway, definitely. And I say, what Allplan is all about is the right tools connected the right way, and that's where I'd like to.
Great. Well, thank you, Ralph, and that is a good conclusion to end on. Sass, you've been nodding along to that, so that's encouraging. But you have with us some examples, I think, now to share, don't you, of how you have embraced BIM to a positive outcome.
I've chosen one of our recent projects, which is actually under construction now.
Great.
And I've chosen it as an example to perhaps illustrate some of the things that I think you've said, Ralph, and also perhaps I should say that I do really believe in proper use of digital technology, because I'm also of the same age that I used to see faxes and drawings, and I've seen the actual changes that digital technology has brought on over the last 15 years, in particular. Absolutely. Perhaps. So I'm actually a believer, with perhaps slightly biased, perhaps. But that said, perhaps through this example, which I'm going to show, I can illustrate the benefits that we've gained. So I'm going to go to my first slide. Now, this project, which actually sort of kicked off in 2017, and it's in London, in Croydon, and we've been doing that for TfL and all the way until with the contractor Morgan Stanley, which is now being constructed. So we've seen the whole, if you like, life cycle from the inception until construction. But of course, one should add, actually, as all professionals agree, that the life cycle of the project, it isn't just construction, it is post-construction and maintenance. And perhaps that's something which I'm perhaps add a few words, that one of the benefits of BIM and digital technology is that, or in fact, it should be looked at the total cycle. That's where the value comes. There's this thing you talked about, Ralph, about initial investment and that perception. Okay, there might be, but when you look at the overall total cycle, life cycle, you certainly reap the reward later on. But on this project, of course, the reason we chose using BIM Level 2, which we did, and it was for feasibility study and optioneering and all the way until detailed design construction. And the project was essentially a deck replacement and lots of utilities, abutment strengthening and road widening, etc. The point about it is the special value that it brought is perhaps something which is specific, well, not specific, but happens a lot in London. Well, London, you've got a lot of areas which of course comes from Victorian age. Yep. And this is a good example. You had bridges which were constructed in Victorian age, the road. So essentially everything in terms of geometry and the way it was constructed was kind of historic, shall we say. Yep. And that's one of the challenges, because the geometric fit and clash detection and the way you actually go about it becomes a special challenge. Now, if you worked in 2D, you've got irregular shapes, irregular roads, everything non-standard, and you want to bring it to up-to-date European and UK standards, that actually there's a room for a lot of errors in terms of documentation, in terms of design, etc. So this is a good example to show that how we actually benefited from that.
And this is a pretty major road, isn't it? It's a busy road. So
it's a small road, but it is quite important. For example, the utilities which goes through these old Victorian bridges. Yeah. You've got fibre optics, gas, high voltage, water. So this is the thing about actually London. Yeah. You drive through these old roads, you don't know what's actually buried in the ground. Yes, and you hit one of those, and of course, part of Croydon goes down. So I think
exactly. So you can't get this wrong. This is
yes. Yeah. So the next slide, this is just sort of a visual. The couple of bridges, but one of them, which you have a lot of that in London or in the UK, is what we call the sort of tram bridge. I think, of course, historically this was actually a rail bridge, which was adopted from Network Rail by London Trams. The next slide, now this is just essentially perhaps recapping or summarizing the challenges which I was talking about. So you have a design which is sort of over a stretch of road with a couple of bridges, and one should add actually that particular spot is very, very tight. We've got schools and houses, and in other words, there is not an inch to move. Yeah. And you then have to demolish and put a new structure which has got different geometry, whilst everything has to be moving in terms of pedestrian flow, etc. Yeah. So that brings a sort of, if you like, a special challenge of tight geometry. A pinch point, as you essentially, when you put the new deck, you can't go an inch up or an inch down, if you like, whilst you've got to keep all those utilities within the new deck. So, and of course, working in a rail environment, that's challenging. And finally, land issues, when you've got front of a shop or a house, and you'll be surprised some of the issues we had. If you want to go 4 inches, they don't want it. It's got to be spot on. Right, so...
crikey, that looks like a complex utility diversion.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest challenge perhaps for this project was utilities, because we had lots and lots of utilities. You wouldn't know, if you just drove it before, you wouldn't know about it. Yeah. Now, again, this is perhaps, I don't know whether this is wide knowledge or not, but as an engineer, as a civil engineer, I've been following the progression of Crossrail in London, and my view, perhaps others agree with me, the biggest single challenge of Crossrail has been utilities, again, because London is London. Yes. The information that you have isn't correct until you dig, and if you find whether it is or it isn't there. So coming back to Rolf's initial point, that accuracy in terms of information, in terms of actual topography, that needs to be exact, and to have that prior knowledge, and have that virtual model, so that you can actually feel, gives you confidence, becomes essential. Yep. Now, on that note, I actually attended the Bridges conference last week here in UK, in Coventry, where there was presentations about not just BIM, about engineering, civil engineering across Europe. And I was quite actually delighted to see one presentation from a Dutch company where they've taken the use of BIM and digital technology sort of slightly even to the next level, whereby it was still BIM level 2, but what they did, they actually used these virtual reality sort of goggles, which sits on their helmet, and as they go to site, it is connected to the BIM model in the office by network. So you click it on and you can see the whole thing. And they actually have used that for a river bridge in Holland, and they showed that it's quite good. And of course, I think all of that will come. And projects such as this, well,
that's quite interesting, because one of the last questions in the survey relates to almost where do you see the industry going, and they mentioned augmented reality and virtual reality, and engineers immersing themselves into reinforcement cages, virtual reinforcement cages, obviously not the real ones, and investigating how things could be built, arranged, or what they look like on site, and so on and so forth. The other thing I'd probably add is the information is great, but if you ask for the wrong information or in the wrong way, then that information is useless. So, I mean, classic are surveys. If you don't ask for the information correct to the right level of accuracy, then it's almost worthless as well.
Well, it's knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think, Seth, I mean, that's really interesting example you use of the Dutch example, because I think we did a story a couple of weeks ago, and Microsoft just launched their latest version of their HoloLens, which with a real deliberate targeting of the construction market, because they can absolutely see that benefit. Now, when I posted on social media, I kind of added the sort of proviso. I mean, my only issue is quite expensive kit, and so it's. I think I'd love to know your thoughts watching, actually, as to whether it is attainable for many companies.
I've got actually a sort of response to that. Again, I use sort of my sort of age and experience to have seen changes in digital technology in all aspects of life, including our smartphones. I remember when the initial mobile came, it was big. As big as a brick. It was in those days something like £1,000, and nobody could afford it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at where we are now. So I think with these things, as time goes, in terms of knowledge and training, people gradually wake up and sort of. It's a cultural thing, actually, partially, I would say. But once that, then it becomes cheaper. If enough people use it, then it actually becomes more. More of a. And the other thing, of course, is in terms of this training and so forth. I think part of the challenge, again, is cultural, because best training is on the job, on the project training.
Totally agree.
And there needs to be enough opportunities that everybody, including smaller companies, bigger companies, they actually have the opportunity to actually engage. And in short, I mean, hopefully I'll live to see the day. I think in time, all of those challenges will iron out. I think we're at perhaps still early stages of these things, but
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think a lot of it is almost cultural as to whether to invest in that kind of thing is the right thing to do in an industry which traditionally doesn't invest in that. So I think you're right. Anyway, do carry on.
Right. Conscious of time, then of course the challenges which I mentioned on this project, I think I've sort of captured it, but I'm just illustrating some by way of visuals, was of course substructure being where it was. You didn't know where it is. You're going to put the pile, you don't know where it goes. And of course we actually, as part of sustainability and environment, we retained some of the old bridges, which is good to know. So for example, we noted that the abutments, which was made from brick, 130, 40 years old, was still in a good nick. So we said, don't demolish it. Okay, it was a bit of an engineering challenge or re-engineering to bring it up to the European sort of code standards, because it obviously, for those sort of civil engineers who do substructure, it's very plenty of these old abutments and retaining walls just standing, but if you do the analysis, they should be all falling. But that said, we've got to bring it to the same safety factor. So the challenge was we actually retained those, and we used anchor systems and such like to sort of strengthen it. With all of those things, again, coming back to the point of saying accuracy becomes key, and geometric fit. And I think, and of course, quality control, and in a way, quality, not just in design, perhaps more so when it goes to site for construction. So I think that's where BIM was quite helpful. The next slide is just some photos, because this is currently under construction. That's what I was just talking about, that, for example, you can just about in the photo to the sort of left of the screen see the existing structure under one of these bridges. The top, which is cast iron, completely corroded. Obviously the deck had to go, but we did retain the existing abutments, and it still had challenges, because in terms of accuracy, the levels that these anchors go, those are the anchor holes, and of course it went, and of course lots of piling, as you can imagine. But I'm pleased to say that, again, using BIM, I think, and sort of the accuracy of digital technology, touch wood, so far there's been everything going swimmingly. There's one more thing, perhaps I'll choose the slide talking about software and reinforcement, which I'll come in a minute. I think, I've covered this point, utilities, and of course the utilities ought to be said for those people who have had that experience. It isn't just the structure. As you go in the road, you assume that it goes from A to B. It doesn't. It could go like this.
Yes.
So you never know until you dig it.
Yes.
And don't make too many sort of loose assumptions. Which of course brings us to the next point of the mud reinforcement, clash detection and so forth. Perhaps one of the biggest value we've derived on this project has been clash detection, so far insofar as that when they go to construct a new structure, we perhaps, hopefully, it's got like 90% of the things have been able to be sort of dealt with. But also reinforcement, which of course brings us actually to one of your products, Ralph, where we used all-plan 3D RC detailing. And again, when you have very irregular shapes, especially the areas in this project where we had quite irregular shapes, use of 3D RC detailing has been quite good. Very quickly then, the land issues, I said the same issue sort of in terms of geometry. And finally, I think I'll just recap that there's been a lot of benefits. I'll just perhaps, in terms of quality, in terms of cost, I would say as well. I think that this perception of cost is a bit erroneous. It's not the upfront cost, it's the maintenance and construction, but certainly quality control. And of course, I think that's what I would say.
So just on that, you quite rightly mentioned the importance of then using the model going into operation and maintenance phase. So is Transport for London going to adopt your model and use it as a digital twin?
Well, hopefully they will. In fact, pretty much all the TfL projects, civils projects, following the 2015 sort of ISO where BIM has become mandatory. So I think I'm pleased to say TfL has sort of risen to the sort of challenge, and in fact any bid you do these days, if it's a civils project, mostly pretty much all bids, if it's rail related or LU, it's a requirement. So obviously the reason could be that they will use it. Well, they will have the BIM model. They've got that, and of course hopefully
Great.
That will be useful.
Okay, well, thank you, Sas. And if you have questions for Sas, and about his case study, or broadly, and more broadly, how Pell Freshman is embracing BIM, then obviously get in touch, and we will ask it in a short while. But handing over neatly now to Sean, we've heard the civils example, where perhaps aided by the BIM mandate more so. You're more of a structural kind of buildings kind of
we do civils as well, but
how is your experience?
Smaller scale civils maybe. So project I want to talk about is a school project. Its contract value of 4.6 million, you can see there. Our involvement was just after planning. Actually, the architects had just got planning. And we've modelled the whole building in all plan, including the superstructure, substructure, all the drainage as well. And also we've provided some of the schedules you've been talking about, Ralph, quantity takeoff schedules that we wouldn't have done previously. So we did all the substructure concrete takeoffs for the contractor, and the drainage and manhole takeoffs automatically. And that's something that we simply wouldn't have been able to do. We were literally able to give them a schedule, and they were doing their own takeoff anyway. But they could check the numbers straight away with their subcontractors. And I think this is really where the power is for me in BIM.
So what would you have been doing previously then? Would it just been a lot of paperwork, basically?
Well, you wouldn't have. I mean, different engineers probably have different views on this, but you wouldn't have necessarily given them the takeoffs.
Right.
We went to university. We all did quantity surveying module, and we all learned how to take off quantities. We don't very often do it, and I don't have a problem with giving contractors that
so it's
information.
Normally be more of a sort of job done by the QS or the contractor.
But we're sat on all this information now with the models, and why not pass it on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people are worried about the risks, but if you take a sort of a pragmatic approach and say, look, I'm giving you this information to help you out, probably do your own check, but overall it depends on the size of the project. We can have, it can save a lot of time.
It sort of goes back to what I said as well about packaging information. You've got, as you say, you've got all that lovely information, that just use it, but for a different purpose. It's just about it. It's one thing for design, it's another thing for takeoff, and it's something else for visualization, maybe something else for programming. There's no need to just put it in again or remeasure it. It's there. Just use the information. Yeah, that's key. Yeah.
So I think I guess what I'm saying is, if you think using BIM is just a replacement for 2D drawing, then it's not. It's a different way of thinking, and I think that's what you perhaps don't realise before you make the jump, and you won't, and how innovative you want to be with it is entirely up to you. So we used a separate program as well as Allplan, which is BIM Plus, which is an online collaboration tool, and we used that at a number of our design team meetings and at client sign-off meetings. And it was really useful in one particular instance on this slide, where originally the plan was to connect the foul water system into the road, in fact the other side of the road. And all those lines at the bottom of the slide are various services, gas, electric, water, that are in that road, just as you were showing earlier.
So that's the route you decided to go, obviously.
And we basically presented to the client and the contractor that we thought this was carrying
risky,
a lot of risk, and therefore, some unknown costs. So we developed an alternative solution, which was a pumped solution to another manhole. Let's not try and go through that maze of services in the road. Let's go another way, and that's what we did. And we you can see the pump on the right, and it pumps round the building and connects to a manhole on the other side of the building, which didn't work for gravity levels, so we did have to have a pump. But I think, who knows what problems we would have had if we had started digging in that road.
I think this goes back to something that I've said for many, many years, is that BIM enables you to make informed decisions more efficiently as well, because it's a great communication tool as well. It says, why have you put a pump in? Because we've got all these because we've got this conglomeration of services, and if you want to go through there, that's fine. But our advice, this.
Essentially, you could call it a risk management tool. It manages risk.
And that's, I think that is being recognised as well moving forward, because health and safety is becoming more and more of a big question. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's an article coming up in New Civil Engineer, but it is the next thing that BIM is going to be used for. For certain, definitely.
I actually think that's a really interesting example, isn't it? Because there's an ongoing operational cost to putting a pump in, which you'd have to put into the round. So you've obviously that's exactly that. You can make that whole life cost decision. That there's an ongoing operational cost, but presumably the risk to the capital cost has been significantly reduced.
That's right.
So that's the power of it, isn't it?
And until we showed that previous visual to the client.
They just wouldn't have got it.
They wouldn't have got it. They weren't accepting it. They were dead against a pump. And it's very difficult to quantify. We've not connected the road. We've potentially not had the problem in the road. How much has that saved us? Who knows? But we do know that this is a project that's currently being built at the moment, that we are way more certain that this can be built to a certain cost.
And I guess what's also interesting there in that example is you've used two different software solutions, melded them together, and in that spirit of interoperability and open data.
Well, those two pieces of software, Allplan and BIM Plus, work seamlessly together, so that's really good. So, one of the reasons I set up the practice in the first place was to explore the benefits that digital technology could bring. I set up the practice in 2005, and it was it's fairly early days, and we were a small practice in kind of 2012, still of 2 people, but when we really got behind the BIM and started investing in our own training and looking at what we could do with it. Now we're a team of 15 technical staff. And I'm not saying BIM and digital engineering was the sole reason for that. It was, there are other factors, but it was a significant factor because it enabled us to look at things and do things that we couldn't really have done in the same way before. And it essentially took the company from working kind of previously in 2D methods of construction right through to 3D, full data-rich models.
Yeah.
And the good thing about Allplan in particular was that all of that transition can happen in that one program. So that when we started using Allplan, we were in 2D, now we're in full 3D. And having the ability to switch between the two, it's just common sense. Why would you ditch all your 2D methods of working? It doesn't make sense. We spent years learning how to do this, and it's risky. Putting all your eggs in 3D, and this is the point that I'm making, really. That
so this comes to the education point, but it does also come to that point, perhaps between the difference between the big and the small, the haves and the have-nots. To as you say, to completely transform your processes into an entirely 3D process. That's a lot of investment and a lot of time and energy and
I dare say risk as well.
Risk.
To be honest, because if you can take a workforce that is already proficient in 2D methods and move them up into 3D and ultimately BIM working, then that's of great benefit as well.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying
tools.
Carry on doing 2D forever. I'm just saying that one of the barriers to people taking this up is that fear about they are going to abandon all that 2D stuff. And what I'm saying is you don't have to.
You can transition gradually as your competence and your team's skill allows. Yes.
And perhaps a good point would be that BIM isn't just about 3D, it's about processes. In fact, it's more about processes and quality assurance and common data environment.
Totally agree with
that. So you can still have a 2D and have a BIM.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things we learned since we've been using BIM, I just want to run through a few things that I thought might be useful, might not be, but as we said, it's good to have 2D and 3D capability in the same program. It just makes sense. We're able to build building structures, roads and drainage in the same model, and rather than our kind of teams working in kind of silos, our structural and civil engineers, because we're working on the same model, it actually enhances the amount of collaboration and coordination. And we think our own information is more coordinated as a result of that. In terms of the process, I think we've learned a lot too on the process, and I think that's also something that you just have to go through. Before if you're not doing BIM, you won't necessarily get what I'm talking about. But there's a process which involves sort of managing your own modelling, or managing what you're modelling, and how that works in relation to other consultants or the lead consultant on the project. And it's also about managing that, because starting to model the project too early can have significant pitfalls if you're not certain about what you're doing in the process. You might have to go back to the start again. And picking out also, Ralph, what you were talking about earlier, the architect's design development. We're never going to stop the architect's design development. That is going to happen. But depending on where you are at the model and what you've chosen to model and how you are managing that design development has a fairly major effect on what elements of the model you're having to rework. And this is why we're seeing such issues crop up in that survey, because it's always been an issue, 2D or 3D, but in 3D BIM, it's more acute because it's not just tweaking a few lines,
Yes.
And so, well, we won't, we won't show that. We'll tweak this line here. There's a setting out.
It's an open book,
right? Now we're talking about elements that carry a lot more data. They're in proper 3D space, and you cannot fudge moving around. They need to be properly coordinated, and this is the.
As you say, they're not just elements of bits of. Actually, there's data attached to these things in the full BIM model, isn't there? You know, there's potentially a purchasing decision being made based on this. So if you change that, you change a lot of things.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying to be negative. I'm just making people aware that this the process that helps manage that.
Yes.
And what you want to get out of that.
It's certainly easy to change things in a BIM environment, and I think that's one of the things that uncontrolled change is a no-no.
It's a bad change.
It's a bad change. It shouldn't be a change, basically. And again, it's how you manage the change that is key, rather than just doing it. But I mean, these environments. I mean, picking up the pumping chamber there that you showed on your slide previous, and moving it. That's a really straightforward thing to do. But all the connected pipes that are with it, with them moving without any review process, is a fundamental no-go area as far as I'm concerned. It's one of those. It's one of those standards and quality assured that that SAS mentioned. Is you've got to have quality information, and it's got to be managed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think you've all illustrated a point beautifully that just because you can, to a if you're talking to me as a client, just because I can make constant changes, it does not necessarily equal a good process. And I think you can use BIM to actually demonstrate the downside of constant changing, because actually somewhere along the line something's got to get built, and eventually you have got to lock down to what you're going to build and then think about building it. Well, we've got some good questions come in, so perhaps we should start taking those, and they are all picking up a few points we've made. There's a couple that have come in. One here from Mahmood. Thank you, Mahmood, asking around. And it comes back to a point around getting the sort of the construction side more, the subcontractors more involved in using BIM. But a question here around to what extent does incorporating lean construction techniques into the BIM workflow help overcome issues that arise at design stage? To what extent can we embed lean construction into what we're doing here?
I think it's very feasible, but you need to be able to. I think it also comes back to a certain degree about openness, about being connected systems, rather than system A and system B and system C. If we had connected systems that could populate elements from one system with another system, then I believe that they would break down those barriers of being able to incorporate not just lean construction, but many other different aspects as well. I mean, looking at, say, for instance, linking NBS specs into the model, being able to take out quantities and so on and so forth, and specifications from the model, all rely on information. But what you don't want to be doing is manually typing that information in. You want to be able to link from one to the other, bring the information, and then use it, and then carry on. So, we always talk about building on information rather than build, drop. It's that important. We must maintain a positive information flow at every instance that we can. But for it to work, these individual systems have to be able to talk with each other, and those are the barriers that we've got to break down. I certainly believe at the moment. So it's certainly feasible, but we need to do more work as an industry.
I mean, I echo that actually. I think it comes down to language and the skill to use the product or the toolkit. So I would say that there is not necessarily a conflict between lean construction and doing it in BIM. If you have, like you said, a very sort of fully trained BIM team with the BIM stuff and the right software, which everything is fine, absolutely there is no conflict. You can actually create lean construction all the time. It is I think it is at this stage in the industry where admittedly I think your survey perhaps shows that there's not everybody has the skills, not everybody knows how to use it, and there is this barriers of language, if you like, which causes these things. And of course then you could say, well, if it's a lean small construction, then how do I get the financial benefit, you know? Yeah.
I think with subcontractors, my experience is that you've got to plant seeds early.
Yeah.
This is going to take a little while to grow. So
Yes.
I think just expecting subcontractors just to magically get on board with this is not a realistic expectation. You know, go and engage with them, go and have a meeting with them, show them what you're doing, and let them discover what they might be able to get out of the process. We've done that with a few specific subcontractors who we're teaming up with, one on a modular type of buildings, and that is growing. So,
Right, and I suppose what specific I don't know, specifics or methods or tools which I mean specifics or all plan offerings for contractors which could really kind of sort of really help them on that journey.
So I mean certainly the for me the key tool for collaboration has got to be our BIM Plus product, which will bring models in and other documents from many different sources, combine and sort of visualize exactly how they fit together, how they work together, resolve conflicts and push the project forward. That's for me is the key communicate, and we've seen it on many projects. I mean there are examples all over the internet on how BIM Plus in use with regards to that. And it's amazing to see how the tool is used sometimes. It's almost exactly as I described it. You've got contractors, you've got consultants in a room, they're looking at a TV screen, they're deciding what the problem is and how to solve it, rather than spending half an hour looking for the issue. They're finding it and they're spending half an hour how to solve the issue, and that's the change.
And I suppose we've a great tool we already mentioned earlier, and there's a question here from Neil. Thank you, Neil. Who suggests that that Dutch company that you were using the VR sort of HoloLens goggles might be Royal Haskoni DHV. If it was, well done. Was it?
Possibly.
But Neil's point is the client has been really impressed with well, you were impressed, so probably no surprise that the client is really impressed with it, and it's how to make that business as usual, because it's, and I suppose it is a steady drip feed kind of solution, but I guess how do you take that and then put that into business as usual in collaboration? I suppose.
I actually thought about that when I saw it. I think again it comes down to perceptions. The investment needed for these things these days is not huge. Everybody it's the know-how. It is what become about the know-how. So if people, or what you're saying, training, which of course training, as you said, and I think really everything comes down to skills and training. If you can use stuff properly and quickly without any sort of errors, and buying the kit isn't particularly that challenging. In my view, I think the biggest sort of step to climb is actually the training, and of course in this case, if you're a company you've trained your staff, site staff, how to use it, the technology is there. So I think it's less of a challenge than perhaps one perceives, and indeed the proof of the pudding being in the eating. The example which was shown on that project in that conference, they said they were using it. It wasn't a problem,
Sometimes you find these things are embedded into the contract as well, but a lot of the time it's enlightened clients or consultants like Royal Haskoning. If it sounds right up their street, to be fair, pushing the boundaries. It's recognising that there's a new tool, and then it's finding out how best we can use that tool in our day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and also I would say it's understanding value rather than just cost.
Yes.
People talk about money all the time. There are other values which you can get. You know, the fact that you on site you wouldn't have the hassle of dealing with issues, or for example, or you don't actually have to do the level. You can see it. Yeah, that wall is slightly, off level or something.
Yeah. I mean, having I mean, others are using it. I know companies like ACOM are using it heavily, and I'm sure all big companies are, and you can absolutely see the value of it when you. But I guess it is. I say that's that culture, isn't it? Around investing a little bit in a bit of technology, but then in the training to use it, or at least letting people loose on it to use it. Which is just when we're conservative as an industry, aren't we? We don't like kind of giving people new toys to play with because we're not sure what they're going to do with them.
Yeah, it's like everything takes time. But I mean, again, in support of such technologies, we know that, for example, Network Rail are now using that not for the purpose of, in that context, but in terms of maintenance, because in a meeting room, they create the holographic model, and they use it for training of the younger engineers, and they can also do a bit of a design discussion. And again, as long as you know which button to press, then I think you're there.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's just a further question here around, which is really more of a comment than a question, but I think it's worth emphasising, the use of BIM, and you've just said it as a communication tool, and that does seem to be something which, in terms of selling benefits, I think most people get it, but it's worth highlighting, isn't it? That I guess, Sean, do you even see? I mean, obviously you saw it there with your example. It's a classic example, isn't it?
Yeah, on another project actually for one of the Oxford colleges. It's an £18.5 million project. Interestingly, the architect isn't using BIM.
No. So
we use BIM, and we've done the whole thing in 3D. And the really interesting thing is that we suggested to use BIM Plus as the online collaboration tool, and now everyone's engaged with that. So even though the architect hasn't got a BIM model that they're looking at, everyone's talking about our model, the structural and civil model, because it's such an easy way to highlight issues, flag issues, talk about it, and we've got a whole conversation going on around objects rather than having to mark up something on a 2D drawing. This area, what do you mean? This, or the, you're talking about actual elements, and we couldn't have foreseen that. In fact, we didn't. And it just happened, and now we're using the whole system about number of issues closed out, number of issues still remaining. So you do have to have a bit of a explorer's head on in as much as you might not know exactly what you're going to get out of it, because there is some exploring to do. But know that there's lots of stuff there to explore.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So we've got about 2 minutes left, so it's probably just time to answer a final question, which I think is quite a simple one to answer, which is, and it's an interesting one, how dynamic are all plan tools? I think this was aimed at you, Ralph, but potentially also those who use them. How dynamic are all plan tools in terms of querying their outputs? That's an important skill for engineers, I guess, checking that the machine is giving the right answer.
So, I mean, bearing in mind that Allplan is fundamentally a model authoring tool, so checking outputs, I guess you're going to be looking at producing drawings, which are views of the models. So you create the views, you put them onto drawing sheets, you create schedules. Schedules are really easy to create as well. There's a lot of black box stuff knocking around in the industry. It's very like the rest of Allplan and Allplan tools. It's a very open system. So produce the drawings, produce PDFs, produce different formats as well if needs be. Output check, reincorporate. I mean, build that into BIM Plus as well, where you actually publish the model and publish the drawings that go with the model, and then you can keep on with revisions of the model. You can do revision compares of the model as well online, and then you've got the revisions of the documents that you've taken off. But you are in complete control of what you take and how you take it off. And the organisation, the organisation of an all-plan model is very, very efficient.
Yeah,
as well.
So I was just going to pick up on
Thanks,
before we start modelling, we sit down. It's not like 2D where you just can start drawing something. Modelling properly involves planning out what you're going to do, how you're going to structure that from the start, and this is where you get the kind of check-in and quality, in that you're building that model, structuring that model, using the organisational structure to achieve what you want to achieve, and how you build the model actually determines to a certain extent the amount of functionality you can have, and how easy it is then to change the model. And that's going back to the process. You can't just blindly start modelling something.
No.
That I can guarantee that will not go well.
No.
What you need to do is take a whatever, few hours, half a day, plan out what you're going to do first, depending on the size of the project, and then you can really reap the rewards.
Okay, makes total sense to me.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we are pretty much up against time. So thank you for joining us here today and helping hopefully break down some of the barriers to adoption of BIM. So thank you, Sean, and thank you, Sas, and thank you, Ralph. And thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it, and keep your eyes peeled for the next New Civil Engineer webinar, which will be coming along in the not too distant future. But until then, keep reading New Civil Engineer, keep experimenting and using BIM, and thank you for watching. Good afternoon.